My speech today is a speech that was done by Antony Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State. He gave this speech on February 12, 2022 in Honolulu, Hawaii, where he met the foreign ministers of South Korea and Japan. Good afternoon, everyone. I am very grateful to my colleagues, Foreign Ministers Hayashi and Chung, for a very productive set of meetings today. And it's good to be not just with colleagues, but with friends right here today. For decades, the United States alliance with Japan and the Republic of Korea have been among our most important, not only in the Indo-Pacific, but around the world. They are rooted in an ironclad security relationship, America's steadfast commitment to defend both allies, in our deep and growing economic and trade ties, and in the abiding bonds between our people. But we increasingly recognize that if we are going to meet the complex challenges of our time and take a full advantage of the opportunities for our people, the Republic of Korea, Japan, and the United States must do more together. We have to learn to do trilaterally what's become natural to do bilaterally. And that takes intense engagement, which is exactly what we've been pursuing. The result is unprecedented cooperation among us, as evidenced by the substance of today's meeting. The U.S. is also committed to helping our partners work through challenges in their relations, which is manifestly in the collective interests of the region and of the people in all three of our countries. The last time I was here at the Daniel K. Inouye Asia-Pacific Center was in 2016, with the Vice President at the time, Joe Biden. We were here for a trilateral meeting with the Republic of Korea and Japan. And as the then Vice President said at that meeting, quote, "We are making trilateral engagements between our countries a habit, and good habits form good relationships," end quote. That is why we've held 3 trilateral ministerial meetings in the last year. We are also making it a habit to work together across our governments at every level, including when Deputy Secretary Sherman hosted her trilateral counterparts in November, and she will continue to carry that process forward. It is also essential to delivering on our strategy for a free and open Indo-Pacific, which we released yesterday. That strategy reflects the fundamental truth that more than any other part of the world, what happens in this region is going to shape the lives of Americans and people around the world in this 21st century. The strategy sets out several concrete ways that we will work to turn this vision into reality, benchmarks that we can hold ourselves to over the next couple of years. Strengthening trilateral cooperation among Korea, Japan, and the United States is one of those benchmarks. It is indispensable to virtually everything we want to do in the region. So, as with my entire trip, we are not just talking about focusing on the Indo-Pacific, we are actually doing it. And that's what we did in today's trilateral meeting across a range of important issues reflected in the joint statement that we will issue. We discussed ways to deepen our trilateral efforts to end the COVID-19 pandemic, from boosting vaccine manufacturing and improving distribution, to increasing financing for global health security so that we can detect and prevent the next pandemic. The Republic of Korea and Japan will play key roles in a meeting that I will convene on Monday to set out a new global action plan, which will drive greater coordination and urgency in our shared push to end the pandemic. We explored ways that we can work together to meet the ambitious targets that each of our countries set when it comes to tackling climate change, and how we can team up to help other countries meet their goals. That includes cooperating our investments in sustainable infrastructure and in building resilience to the inevitable changes that come from climate change. And we focused on ways we can strengthen our economic security, which is increasingly interconnected. That means shoring up vulnerabilities in our supply chains that have been exposed by the pandemic, from semiconductors to critical materials, which will also make us less reliant on suppliers who violate human rights or flout environmental standards. This also is much easier to do with 3 advanced economies than 2 or 1. Our economic security also depends on upholding the rules of the road that have enabled decades of unprecedented security for our people and prosperity across the region and around the world. This includes ensuring that our workers and businesses can compete on a fair and level playing field, and protecting freedom of navigation and overflight, including in the South and East China Seas. And it includes working together to shape new norms and standards that align with our values and interests, such as in emerging technologies, which are driving big sectors of our intertwined economies and touch on virtually every aspect of the lives of our people. Finally, we discussed how to advance our shared goal of the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and finding lasting peace there. We condemn the DPRK's recent ballistic missile launches and its unlawful nuclear and ballistic programs, which are clear violations of the UN Security Council resolutions. And we continue to work to find ways to hold the DPRK accountable, as we did by imposing sanctions on 8 DPRK-linked individuals and entities last month. Together with our respective special representatives on this topic, Ambassador Sung Kim, who is here, Special Representative Noh, and Director General Funakoshi, we discussed ways that we can deepen trilateral cooperation to deter the DPRK, limit the reach of its most dangerous weapons, defend against its provocations or use of force, and above all, keep the American, Japanese, and Korean people safe, which is our highest responsibility. I want to underscore that we have no hostile intent toward the DPRK. We remain open to dialogue without preconditions if Pyongyang chooses that path. Before I turn to my colleagues and with their indulgence, let me give a brief update on the crisis in Ukraine, which we also discussed at some length in today's meetings. I spoke by phone last night with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, where I raised our serious concerns that Moscow may be considering launching a military attack against Ukraine in the coming days. I made clear, as President Biden did today in his conversation with President Putin, that a diplomatic path to resolving this crisis, a crisis created by the unprovoked massing of Russian forces all around Ukraine, that diplomatic path remains open. The way for Moscow to show that it wants to pursue that path is simple. It should de-escalate rather than escalate. And it should not only talk about seeking a diplomatic outcome, but actually work toward one. On our call, Foreign Minister Lavrov said that the Russians are working on a response to the paper that we sent to Moscow more than 2 weeks ago, proposing concrete areas for discussion. It remains to be seen if they'll follow through on that, but if they do, we will be ready to engage together with our allies and partners. I also underscored that if Moscow chooses the path of aggression and further invades Ukraine, the response from the United States and our allies and partners will be swift, it will be united, and it will be severe. Yesterday, we ordered the departure of most of the Americans still at the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv. The risk of Russian military action is high enough, and the threat is imminent enough, that this is the prudent thing to do. No one should be surprised if Russia instigates a provocation or incident, which it then uses to justify military action it had planned all along. A core team will remain in Ukraine with our dedicated Ukrainian colleagues as we continue to work relentlessly to resolve this crisis through deterrence and diplomacy. Our security assistance to Ukraine, as well as aid for other sectors like public health and economic development, all of that will continue. In the meeting that the three of us had, we discussed the threat that Russia's aggression poses, not only to Ukraine, but to the entire international rules-based order, which has provided a foundation for decades of shared security and prosperity for our people here in this region and again around the globe. When one country seeks to flout the sovereignty and territorial integrity of another, when it seeks to change the borders of another by force, when it seeks to dictate to that country its choices, its policies, with whom it may associate, when it seeks to exert a sphere of influence to subjugate a neighbor to its will, that is profoundly corrosive and undermining of these very rules and norms that underscore our own security, and again, not just in Europe, but around the world. And if we allow that to go unchallenged, if we allow it to proceed with impunity, then we open a Pandora's box. Again, not just in Europe, but around the world. And that is why we agreed to stick together in our response to Russia, no matter which path it chooses. Times like these are the reason that we have invested decades in building America's unmatched set of alliances and partnerships. They underscore why the work our three countries are doing here today is so crucial, so that we can meet this challenge and others to come from a position of unity, solidarity, and strength. With that, let me turn over to Foreign Minister Chung.